Thank you, Christina. So what I'm going to share today is a work in progress. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm a lecturer in EAP at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm also our department's Director of International. And a main responsibility of this role is to develop the Centre's international vision or strategy. So in this section, I'm going to outline my methodology and the ways that this project intersects teacher education and intercultural communication. And this will hopefully demonstrate a way to begin intercultural teacher or staff development. Next slide, please. So in UK higher education, as we've heard, a key strategic agenda is internationalisation, and this can provoke diverse reactions from stakeholders. So on the one hand, it can be viewed as collaborative, as inclusive, as providing opportunities, access, mobility. On the other hand, it can be viewed as exploitative, as a neoliberal income generation, with neoliberal income generation objectives, for example. So the Director of International role was, for me, an opportunity to create a strategy that embodies a more positive vision of international higher education, informed by the field of EAP and academic literacies, where there's an asset mindset to students' language and literacy practices and interculturality. And critical reflection and reflexivity are ways to address concerns. And these are also key components of intercultural communication. So I was aiming for strategy development as well as the outcome to be equitable. Next slide, please. So interculturality is a way to navigate, is a pathway to navigate global higher education if the goal is inclusive and equitable higher education for everyone. The University of Edinburgh's Skills for Success is the recently launched graduate attribute framework. And you can see a link on the slide here if you want to look this up. It actually involves many intercultural components. For example, understanding biases, curiosity, adopting different perspectives, collaboration, reflection, recognising our own strengths and emotions, which are very familiar from Christina's section, communication and inclusivity. So if it's the university's aim to develop these skills and qualities, or for the students to develop these skills and qualities, these need to be embedded, they need to be enacted, they need to be present in curricula and pedagogical approaches. And teachers and staff in general need to be guided and they need to be supported. And as you can see, this view is also evident in the literature, that intercultural communication is a prerequisite for teacher education. Fanning et al., for example, state that intercultural communication is important to avoid injustice and reproduction of essentialist attitudes to language and culture. They recommend reflecting on identity, construction or reconstruction and criticality as a part of teacher education programmes. More widely in society, as Christina mentioned, we need to draw on intercultural communication in response to unsettled and extreme times where there's a need for peace and resolution and understanding, moving away from discrimination that could ensue. So an intercultural lens or an intercultural goal is very helpful in broadening these perspectives and reflecting on identity and dialogue and our implicit or explicit biases, as Mruz and Calawas report. Next slide, please. However, there are challenges and barriers. In a study in Portuguese schools, Cele and all, they claim that in Europe, across Europe, teachers require support for cultural diversity, and they're not afforded this due to insufficient teacher development time and a lack of time in general. Sugimoto et al. Suggest that pre- and in-service teachers perceive barriers in understanding their own students. And Liu et al. 2024, they argue that barriers are teachers' limited understanding of intercultural communication and a concern about conflict in the classroom and the belief that intercultural education is not their responsibility. So this all needs to be guided by teacher training, and as Conti 2025 argues, essentialist attitudes to difference are a persuasive barrier. Next slide, please. So how do we overcome these barriers? So I'll talk a little bit about my approach. So a bit about my context more specifically. So I work in the Centre for Open Learning at the University of Edinburgh. And this department comprises three fairly distinct units. There's the Academic Language and Literacies unit, where I'm based. There's the Open Studies section, they deliver lifelong learning courses. And there's Languages for All, who deliver language courses, a range of different language courses. So you can see within this centre, there's a range of disciplines, a range of epistemologies. Within each section, there is actually much international activity. So for example, we deliver the International Foundation Programme, a very large pre-sessional programme, also language courses. We have the pre-undergraduate International Summer School. We also deliver courses for our international university partners. And each unit has its own objectives for these aspects of international activity, but there's a lack of strategic direction and there's no overt school-wide international strategy. So my method was to facilitate and develop focus groups. I was keen to involve colleagues for diverse voices to contribute to the development of our strategy. It seemed the only way within this context. So I devised a colleague input project consisting of these focus groups. So there was one for each unit, as well as professional services. The first questions that were discussed within these groups were firstly around each section's perception of their alignment with the university's global plan. And secondly, to articulate an aspirational vision. And these focus groups became a reflective or reflexive space, and where each section's identity was a focus of discussion. And also many aligning points were surfaced. Next slide, please. In terms of findings, a notable common emerging thread was across all four groups rather, was my colleagues' awareness of the need for equity and for inclusion. And there was a decolonial positioning and a view of student partnership. And this partnership could be through language, through multilingualism, or through pedagogical approaches. And throughout, there was a rejection of a deficit narrative of international students and of international students as a homogenous group. There was an aim to create space in partnerships and for reciprocal sharing and learning in the classrooms and also in further interactions across academic and professional services contexts. There was an aspiration expressed to develop awareness of students and of staff to engage with interculturality. So clearly then the strategy needs to reflect this. It's of most value if it's linked explicitly with EDI policies, equality, diversity, inclusion policies, but also social justice and critical intercultural communication. Next slide, please. So it hopefully can be seen then that intercultural teacher education or staff development, CPD, is necessary to support and deliver this strategy and achieve and articulate these goals. And an outcome, pleasingly for me, was a suggestion to co-lead intercultural development sessions. So this then is a future plan. Next slide, please. So just to summarise my section, to start out with intercultural communication staff development, from a teacher education perspective, there's a need to recognise the knowledge, the experience that colleagues bring, to harness or even to create demand for development, to understand our context or each person's context within each section for both staff and students through shared exploration and through co-construction through staff development sessions. Thanks then. I'll pass on to Stella, who will present examples within her context.